The M1 rifle was adopted by the U.S. military in 1936. It was used throughout World War II, Korea, and has been used by at least 23 other countries throughout the world. The soldiers found it to be rugged and reliable. It carried awesome firepower and the ability to put the bullets right where they were supposed to go. The GIs were never very far from their M1s, whether eating or sleeping. This rifle was a familiar sight around the world for a great many years. During World War II, there were over 4 million M1s made by Springfield Armory and Winchester. During the Korean War, more M1s were manufactured by Springfield, by Harrington and Richardson, and International Harvester, bringing the total up to approximately 5.5 million. There is a great deal of discussion of exactly how many M1s were made, and unfortunately no one has been able to prove an exact figure. But from the jungles of Burma to the islands in the Pacific, the shores of North Africa, D-Day, Pork Chop Hill. If you ask any American soldier that served in World War II or Korea about the M1 rifle, the odds are pretty good his eyes are going to light up. Because when he knew, when he was in combat, it was his best friend. The M1 was designed by John Garand, and it took a great many years to perfect this fine weapon. Design started in about 1919 for a semi-automatic weapon and proceeded through many different design stages. There were competing weapons from manufacturers such as Peterson, Thompson, and Bang, also Garand, which finally developed into the U.S. M1 rifle. There were several modifications during World War II, such as improved gas system, selective fire, and a larger magazine. But it was impractical to put these into production during war. So these ideas were saved and later developed into the M14 rifle.
The M1 rifle weighs 9.5 pounds. It's 43.6 inches long with a 24-inch barrel. It is air-cooled. It fires the 30 caliber M2 ammunition, also known as 30-06, from an 8-round clip, which is ejected from the rifle after the last round is fired. Has a walnut or birch stock and is usually clipped with a sling. The M1 rifle on the right is equipped with the old style gas cylinder lock screw. This is a solid piece of metal and will not permit the use of a rifle grenade launcher. This M1 has the later type gas cylinder lock screw And this has a valve inside here so that when you install the grenade launcher, it will vent the gas pressure out the end, so you won't damage the rifle. This is the standard front sight, and this one has a match grade front sight. You can see it's considerably thinner than standard. The barrel, the front sight, which is attached to the gas cylinder, the gas cylinder lock, and the gas cylinder lock screw. Now, this right here is a bayonet lug for attaching bayonets, and also flash hiders and grenade launchers. We'll show you later. And this is not a sling swivel, it's a stacking swivel. And again, we'll cover that a little later. Here is the front hand guard and the rear hand guard. Now don't be concerned if your hand guard is slightly loose. Just a little bit of fore and back play in it. This is normal. In fact, for best accuracy, your front hand guard should not be tight. And down here we have the front sling swivel. On the receiver assembly, we have the operating rod, the bolt, the rear sight assembly. Down here is the trigger guard with the trigger and the safety. This is a match rear sight aperture, and this is a regular rear sight aperture. The match grade has a much smaller hole size. It has a hood over it to shade the aperture, and there's a little notch cut out at the top. This whole shade will turn, and if you bring the notch from top to bottom or bottom to top, you will change your point of impact by 1/2 of a click. This is the older type rear sight windage knob. The original sight did not have this bar on here. It had a simple little threaded collar. You would have to loosen the collar up, make your rear sight adjustment, and hopefully tighten the collar back down. The problem is they would not stay tight. You had to use the combination tool to tighten them up, and they would come loose and the sight would fall apart on you. The sight would also jump. It wouldn't hold the settings properly because it was coming loose. So they devised this bar, and they extended the shaft that comes in from the windage knob so that it could be staked to hold the bar in place. The bar wouldn't come off. The sight would come loose, but it wouldn't fall apart. You just loosen the bar up, crank your adjustments in, and then tighten it back down. This is the World War II type elevation knob. You can sight the rifle in loosen that small screw up and then rotate the knob to adjust it to whatever range you've sighted the rifle at without moving the aperture, and then tighten the screw back down. The marking for battle range is set for 300 yards. There are also range graduations around the outside of the drum. This rear sight assembly was developed during World War II, but like so many other ideas, it was impractical to put these in production. You would have to stop the rifle assembly lines at both Springfield Armory and Winchester and allow enough time for the sights to be manufactured, installed in the rifles, and shipped out. And when you're in the middle of a war, you don't have time for this. What they did, they replaced the bar with a threaded collar, very much like the one that was originally on the rear sight, except this threaded collar is part of the windage knob. It will not come out. The entire sight is spring-loaded. To make your windage adjustments on the old rear sight, you had to pull the entire sight to the right to do it. In this one, it has a spring built into the sight itself, and you're just fighting against the little spring. You don't move the whole assembly. This is the new elevation knob. If you'll notice, there's no longer room for battle sight setting on the back, but there is still a mark on around the outside with your range numbers. Again, you adjust the sight to 0 for you, loosen up this screw, turn the knob till it agrees with whatever range you fired at, and tighten the screw back down. This is the type sight that was later used on the M14s also. And here on the other side of the receiver, we have your clip latch. This is a butt plate the rifles were equipped with when they were originally adopted by the Army. Later on, in the beginning of World War II, they adopted this one with a butt trap for cleaning rod and other cleaning utensils. This type was developed from the BAR, Browning Automatic Rifle, for the T-22 experimental rifle, and was used for the M14. It has a flip-up shoulder rest for prone firing, and also a butt trap for cleaning utensils. Of the two sniper model Garands, the first model, the M1C, the scope was mounted to the side of the receiver with 3 screws and 2 pins. The problem is that receiver is rather hard, and they had a very difficult time getting the holes drilled. So they developed during World War II the M1D, which was developed under the designation M1E8 before it was standardized. It's mounted by a large knob with a screw. This goes into a sleeve that's fitted onto the barrel. You don't touch the receiver at all for this modification. It's much simpler to shorten the walnut handguard than it is to drill holes in that receiver. A few interesting features on this scope. The elevation knob is marked off in yards. You simply find out how far away the target is and dial in the appropriate range on the knob, and it will correct for the ballistics of the bullet. Another interesting feature is the built-in lens hood or light shade. Now, because the M1 rifle is loaded directly through the top of the weapon, you can't mount a scope on top. They are both mounted off to the side of the rifle. Now, in order to be able to shoot this thing, they developed a leather-covered cheek pad with felt in here. It's attached to the rifle with a leather thong and 2 screws. And for extra comfort, they developed a rubber eye shade on the back of the scope. From the back, you can see how the scope is offset to the left to allow loading of the rifle. This particular rifle is also equipped with the match rear sight aperture. This rifle was built up in about 1952 from a World War II issue Garand and shipped to Argentina. There is a label on the back of this rifle in German which translates out roughly to match rifle. It's my belief that this particular rifle was never taken out of the box the whole time it was down there. It is in like new condition. I have talked to several old Army and Marine Corps snipers that have used these. One in particular that used an M1C with great success between 1,000 and 1,100 yards. Here's a close-up of the windage and elevation knobs on the M84 scope. The windage knob is adjusted in left or right clicks, and the elevation knob is adjusted in 100 yards. Again, you simply dial in the range and whatever windage correction is necessary and open fire. If you should obtain one of these sniper rifles, the easiest way to sight the scope in is adjust your elevation or windage knobs until it's hitting 0 for you. Then to reset the knob itself to 0, you have to loosen up this threaded ring up here. Now, in the Armorer's repair kit, there is a tool that will fit this, but these kits are very expensive if you can find one. So what I did, I took one of the little piece of sheet steel screwdrivers, took the largest blade, which was too big to be of any practical use anyway, and cut it down to fit the notches. A 9/16 wrench is useful to help hold the windage or elevation knob in place. Make a note of exactly where the knob is set, in case when you loosen the knob up you shift it. You know exactly where it is. Put your wrench on, take your special screwdriver, loosen up the lock ring, run the lock ring all the way out. It will not come all the way off, or it's not supposed to. Run this out until you can lift your windage or elevation knob straight up to clear the detent underneath. Turn it till it's on 0 or 100 yards or whatever you sighted the rifle in at. Set it back down onto the teeth and then tighten the locking knob back up. And there you're set on 0. Of particular need for a sniper is some sort of flash hider. At night, the M1 will produce a fairly prominent muzzle flash. So in World War II, the Army developed and adopted the M2 flash hider, or as we call it after extensive testing, the M2 megaphone. It fits on over the barrel and hooks on the bayonet lug. It will hide the muzzle flash, but it makes the weapon kick significantly more, and if there are enemy soldiers in front of you someplace, they're going to be deaf. Because if you think an M1 is loud, put one of these on and find out what happens. Because of the problems with the M2 flash hider, sometime between World War II and the Korean War, the Army developed the T-37 flash hider. This replaces the gas cylinder lock on the rifle and will eliminate muzzle flash, and has an extra advantage that we discovered in test firing. The weapon does not seem to kick as much as it did before. Now with these long slots in here, this is quite similar to what was adopted for the M14 a few years later. With the early M1s, there was a problem known as the 7th round stoppage, which caused a great deal of difficulty. It was eventually discovered that if the top round in the clip was on the right side of the clip, over here, the 7th round down here would also be on the right hand side instead of the left. What would happen is when the rifle would chamber and fire the 7th round, when the bolt came back, it would eject the clip and the 8th round with it. There were some very subtle changes made in manufacturing from the way the weapon was originally designed to the way they tooled it up. And they corrected these problems. But the easiest way to prevent this problem is load your top round on the left of the clip. This way, the 7th round is also on the left, and you will not have that problem. It can occur in modern rifles as well as the early production run if there are certain parts inside the weapon that are worn. Now, to load these, which may seem simple, you put your bottom round on the right side of the clip, and keep loading until you have a total of 7 rounds into the clip. Okay? You have to make sure that all the rounds are all the way back in, and there's a little groove they'll lock into. Now the top round, which is going to be on the left side here, you can either start it from the front and push it back in, but it's far easier to line it up on the clip where it's going to go and then push it straight down in to load your clip, and then wiggle them around a little bit, make sure they're all seated right. Now the M1 rifle will function perfectly with any 30-06 ammunition from 100 grain to 220 grain. It will eat anything you feed it. To load the M1, first you have to pull the operating rod back, which in turn will open the bolt. But something to be careful of: most M1 rifles, if you don't pull the bolt all the way to the rear, it will not be locked back properly. Instead, it will be sitting on the shell follower. You can look straight down from the top of the receiver and see the bolt. If you bump the operating rod, the shell follower, or the receiver, this is what is going to happen. Okay? Instead, you pull the operating rod all the way to the rear so that when you look down from the top of the receiver, you don't see the bolt. Now, to load, you take your 8-round clip that we just loaded, drop it in the top of the rifle, and push it down. But wait a minute. When the shell follower hits the bottom of the receiver well, it's going to let go of this bolt. And if you have either a weak clip here, doesn't hold on to these shells too well, or you have a partial clip of, say, 7 rounds, I'll let you guess what's going to happen. So what you do, you hold onto the operating rod with your side of your hand,
and shove the clip in with your thumb. Now if you'll notice, the op rod just unlocked. You get your thumb out of the way and then your hand. Now a lot of times the bolt will stay to the rear. The spring tension on the shells in here is so great, it's what's holding it. So you just have to give it a little push. Just a gentle little push, and it will load the rifle for you. To unload the rifle, first you pull the operating rod to the rear to eject the round that's in the chamber, and then you hit the clip release button on the clip ejector, and that will allow the ejector spring to kick the clip out like this, and then hit your release button, and out comes your clip. Now, to close the bolt on this weapon, do not push the shell follower down, because like we demonstrated, when the shell follower hits the bottom of the rifle, that is what is going to happen. Instead, pull your bolt handle slightly to the rear to clear the lock down here, which we'll show you later. Push the shell follower down a half an inch or so. It'll unlock the bolt. Ease the bolt forward slowly until it's over the shell follower, and then get this thumb out of the way, and then let her forward slowly. Now if you're loading live ammunition, always have the weapon on safe. But these are some homemade dummy shells we are using, so it really does not matter. Now, if you wish to load a partial clip with, say, 3 rounds, drop your clip in first, and then insert the rounds one at a time in the clip, staggering properly. Okay? Pull the operating rod to the rear to clear the locks, and push your clip in till it locks, and you'll hear it click. The main reason for holding the bolt to the rear is, if you don't, it's going to bite you. And it's now loaded. One feature of the M1 rifle, which sets it apart from virtually every other rifle, every other weapon in fact, it has a very definite way of telling you that it's empty. After you have fired the last round and the bolt ejects that last round, the clip is spit right out of the rifle, like this. There went the last round. We come a little farther to the rear, and there went the clip. Now, a lot of people have said that that is a detriment to the weapon. It tells the enemy that you're out of ammunition. This is true. It does.
but as fast as you can reload this rifle, by the time they are halfway out of their foxhole to charge, you have a loaded rifle. And unless you are a sniper, I doubt very seriously there's only going to be one of you against several of them out there. I have a friend that goes to these military battle reenactments, and he pulled a very dirty deed one day. He had a full clip in his M1, and he fired a couple of blanks out of it and proceeded to drop an extra clip he had, causing two of the other side to stick their heads up and say, he is now out of ammunition. He was not out of ammunition. So if you go to reenactments, it might be a good idea to keep that in mind. If you can't find factory military dummy rounds, if you can get any of the steel ones, so much the better. They'll last a lot longer than the brass ones. I do not have enough that are in good condition left to fill up a clip. So these are some that I made. They are simply resized and deprimed 30-06 shell casings with a old military surplus bullet stuck in there. It might be a good idea to drill holes in the side like some of the GI dummies, so that you know that they're dummy rounds. I used these bullets because they haven't been cleaned up yet, and gives a pretty distinctive appearance. I know from looking at these that they are dummies. We have assembled a small collection of accessories for the M1. Let's see. This is a early type combination tool. It has a screwdriver attachment. This device here, you put a cleaning patch on and you can go in to clean the chamber out of the rifle. Back here you have a stock case extractor. You'd simply put this in the rifle, hook underneath the shell case and pry the shell case loose. You have a drift right down here for removing a pin, we'll show you later. And these two little hooks right here on the end are for the old rear sight. That little threaded sleeve that would come loose and was replaced by the T-shaped bar, that's what these little prongs are for, to tighten that up. Here is a later type combination tool. The only major difference is this has a chamber brush on it instead of the place to put the patch. Okay, here we have a cleaning rod set. Consists of some rods, a jag you can screw in to run a patch through the barrel, a bore brush, and your handle, which has, again, screwdrivers on it, a swivel piece here you can screw your cleaning rod into and then turn for cleaning the barrel. The end here is useful for disassembling the bolt, and there's a large hole here to put the cleaning rod through, And then this is used for removing your gas cylinder lock screw out of the front of the rifle. Another very handy device is a GI pull-through thong. This one is still wrapped up from World War II, but I have another one we'll show you when we break the weapon down. We have here a muzzle cover dated 1944. It has 2 snaps on it, so it will fit either the Garand or the carbine. And you just pull it on over the muzzle of the rifle, wrap the strap around, and snap it. But I have been told that these will collect moisture inside, so I mainly use it for show. While we're on the front end of the rifle, this is the M7 rifle grenade launcher. Hooks on, and then you take the rifle grenade. This happens to be a practice anti-tank grenade. These could be launched from either high-angle indirect fire or low-angle direct fire. The high-angle fire would be launched from the ground. The direct fire would be launched from the shoulder, and I can guarantee you these things kick like a mule, but it can be done. This rifle grenade here has seen better days because we have launched it. One of the drawbacks with this launcher, there's a pin on here. It goes into your gas cylinder lock screw and opens that valve up to vent gas pressure so that you won't have damage to the weapon. Though later on, sometime around the time of the Korean War, I'm not sure the exact date, they developed the M7A3, which is supposed to have a special gas cylinder lock. It has a reinforced shoulder that would go up here at the top. But I'm just showing this to you, so I don't need to put that on. You put the launcher on, same as the other one. But there's a difference. You can fire regular ammunition through this launcher, not to launch grenades. But what happens is, when you launch a grenade, the recoil of the grenade will push this launcher back into the rifle and open that valve. The reason for the reinforcing up here on the gas cylinder lock is to absorb that recoil. This one is also a little on the tight side to take off. Okay. While we're on the front of the rifle, we have one of my favorite devices. The bayonet. Useful in hand-to-hand combat, herding prisoners in the desired direction, and opening C rations. Now this is the M1 bayonet, shortened. There was an M5 bayonet, came out about the time of the Korean War, slightly different. It didn't have this ring that went around the barrel. It had a pin that would fit in the lock screw, not far enough to hit the valve, just to hold the bayonet. And there were earlier types that were much longer. than this, but unfortunately I do not have one. They had a case for cleaning stuff. This would hold either the pull-through thong or the cleaning rod head. And the other end, you're supposed to put oil in, and the little rod, you pull it out, and when you have a drop of oil on it, you put it wherever you want oil. That would go in the buttstock. Also, they had little itty-bitty containers of rifle grease that would fit in the butt trap. This is a plastic rear sight cover. Simply tops over the rear sight, allegedly to protect the rear sight, but I personally think that rear sight is going to take a lot more punishment than this little piece of plastic. One interesting little goodie. This is a winter trigger. You unlock your trigger housing, put this in the hole, and then close your trigger housing back up. Now it also comes with an adapter, so it can be used with the stamped trigger housings, but this would enable you in winter to fire the trigger with gloves on. They also had a winter safety which would extend down from here and then slightly forward. And this is a little item often spoken of but rarely seen. This is a broken shell extractor. Mainly this was intended for the .30 caliber machine gun. If your headspace was not correct on the 30 cal, you would have a case head separation, making a shell case look like this. How this works, with this stuck in the chamber, of course you're not going to be able to load another round. You would take the stud case extractor, put it in the chamber, and close the bolt. Would push it all the way through the cartridge case, and these little spring fingers here pop out and will catch onto the front of the cartridge, allowing either the extractor on the bolt to pull it to the rear, or what would be preferred would be run a cleaning rod down the end of the barrel on here and then give it a good push to remove the case. But you probably would never have to use one of these on an M1. To carry ammunition around, the usual method was the cartridge belt. Will hold 10 Garand clips in here. Ammunition usually came packed in the clips in these cloth bandoliers. And this one happens to be World War II. And the clips simply fit in the pocket. Like that. Now one item which was rarely, if ever, used. I say that because it is very difficult to find a picture of a rifle with the grenade launching sight on, and also because every grenade launching sight I have found is brand new. This is mounted to the side of the rifle with a special plate. Right about here. It could be removed from the plate, so you don't have this big sight sticking out. And the way this would work, it has a front sight and a rear peep sight. They could be used for direct fire of grenades, although most people prefer to use the rifle sights for that. And it has a little spirit level. There was a chart packaged with these, and it would tell you to launch a certain rifle grenade, say 180 yards, which is close for a rifle grenade. It would give you a number. You would turn it on the mounting plate until that number showed up next to this lever. Little marker. Point the rifle to target and then raise the rifle until the spirit level is centered, and then let it fly. This rifle is easily capable of launching a rifle grenade out to almost 300 yards, and with the boosting charge probably close to 400 yards. Another accessory is the blank adapter. To function as a semi-automatic with blanks, you have to put this on, so most of the gas pressure will go back into the rifle and not outside. You unscrew the gas cylinder lock screw and remove the gas cylinder lock. Screw the blank adapter on over the barrel all the way down, and then run the gas cylinder lock screw in against this shoulder. Now this has the annoying habit of tearing up the blank adapter. So what I have tried with some success, I took an extra gas cylinder lock and cut it off right through here, ending up with a C-shaped sleeve. Put your blank adapter on, drop the lock screw in that sleeve, and then run it down tight. This allows the lock screw to have a greater surface to pull down tight against. It won't chew up the blank adapter, and it'll keep the lock screw in tight. Because if it just pulls out on one point, it won't stay tight no matter what you try. The original US 1903 round was modified in 1906 into the M1906 round. It fired a 150 grain bullet at about 2,700 feet per second. But it was found that it was not that effective at long ranges fired out of a machine gun. So they developed the M1 ball cartridge. This fires 174.5 grain boat tail bullet at just a little bit slower velocity, about 2650 feet per second. A heavier bullet, you have to slow the velocity down, otherwise your chamber pressure increases. Now, long in the late 1920s, it was decided that the average combat use did not require the heavy bullet. So they changed and adopted the M2 cartridge. This fired a 150 grain flat base bullet at about 2,800 feet per second. Now there are a lot of rumors out there that the reason we adopted the M2 ammunition was because the M1 rifle would not function with the older ammunition. I have fired about 100 rounds of M1 ammunition made by Frankfurt Arsenal in the 30s through this rifle. It functioned flawlessly, and it was also some of the most accurate ammunition I've ever got my hands on. So don't believe everything you read. In fact, match ammunition is loaded to much higher standards than regular ammunition, and it incorporates a 174.5 grain boat tail bullet. And this rifle again functions flawlessly with match ammunition. This rifle will function flawlessly with, so far, anything I have fed it. Other ammunition common to the M1 is armor piercing, identified by the black tip, tracer, identified by a red or orange tip, incendiary, which has a blue tip, and armor piercing incendiary, which has a silver tip. Blanks are identified by no bullets, just a plain red cardboard wad. And then you have sporting ammunition, regular soft nose. Now, a few other goodies here out of my collection. Some of the early Garand rifles, and one of the rivals to the Garand, the Peterson rifle, fired the .276 round. This was made by Frankfurt Arsenal in 1929, and I'll compare it to a 30-06 cartridge to show the size. Here we have a old 1918 gallery practice round with a light plain lead bullet. I don't know if it would work at all with the M1. I only have one, so I don't intend to find out. This is a guard round, subloaded. It has flutes at the shoulder to identify it. Again, I have one, so I don't intend to fire it. This is an M22 frangible ball. It wasn't intended to be fired from a shoulder weapon. It was intended for use in modified .30 caliber machine guns against special air targets. The bullet was made of a bake-like plastic and would break up on impact with the aluminum skin and not do any damage. This is a high-pressure test round, loaded considerably higher pressure than the regular 30-06 cartridge. After overhaul or manufacture of weapons, you would fire this cartridge to find out if the weapon is going to blow up or not. This is a dummy round, one of the two varieties. The other one has flutes down the entire length of the cartridge case. And this is a grenade launching blank. Notice it has a rose petal crimp on the end instead of the red cardboard wad. And also for use with the grenade blank is a boosting charge. This would be inserted in the grenade launcher before you put the grenade on, and it would increase your range by about 50%. As I said, just about any 30-06 ammunition will work very reliably in the M1 rifle. Everything down to and including the 22 accelerators that used to be on the market. This M1 will eat accelerators all day long.
To field strip the M1, you first have to unlock the trigger guard. This is done by pulling it to the rear and downward. Now some trigger guards are very stiff, so you insert a cleaning rod into the trigger guard and pull it to the rear to unlock the trigger guard. Now you swing the trigger guard all the way down and remove your trigger group. To remove the barrel receiver group from the stock group, some M1s fit very tightly. If yours is tight, grab the rear sight knobs and smack the back of the stock to knock it loose. After you have the weapon broken down into the three main groups, you take your barrel and receiver group, grasp your operating rod spring guide. To remove it, you pull it to the rear and up and disengage the hooks from the follower arm. A lot of times the hooks, when they come forward, they'll pull a follower arm with it. So if you put your finger on the shell follower, that will eliminate that problem. And out comes your operating rod spring and guide. Next, you have to remove this pin. This can be done with a small punch, the point of a dummy round, or there is a small pin punch on the combination tool. You remove the pin, and the easiest way to remove these pieces is simply turn the rifle over, and they will usually all fall out for you. You have your shell follower, you have your operating rod catch, you have the follower arm, and the bullet guide. To remove the bolt, pull your operating rod to the rear and then apply a slight up and out pressure and go forward slightly until it pops loose. Drop your operating rod down and pull it back out of the gas cylinder. To remove your bolt, slide it forward almost all the way. To remove the bolt, which can sometimes be a little difficult, run the bolt up all the way forward and turn it slightly. Now for the gas cylinder, you will need either the screwdriver part of the combination tool or the handle for the cleaning rod. If you use this, stick a cleaning rod through the hole and unscrew the gas cylinder lock screw. Now, if this lock screw is very tight, don't grab it by the hand guard or the receiver or even the gas cylinder and try to break it loose by hand. It won't work. What I would recommend is you get an old monkey wrench, also sometimes called a Ford wrench. Put this on your gas cylinder right here and then break your screw loose. That way you're applying pressure against the gas cylinder itself, not against the barrel. There are splines in here that hold the gas cylinder on the barrel, and you don't want those splines to work loose. So this is a very good way to prevent that. After you have your gas cylinder lock screw out, remove your gas cylinder lock. And then remove your gas cylinder. Now, some Army manuals tell you to use a block of wood and beat on the back of the front sight if necessary. I find it better to beat on the back of the bayonet lug. These front sights are very sturdy, but I do not like banging on sights. But in any case, it isn't necessary on this particular rifle. Then you can remove your handguard. And this completes field stripping of the barrel and receiver group. The trigger group consists of your floor plate or trigger housing assembly, the hammer spring guide and plunger, and the trigger, and a few other little odds and ends. It is not necessary to strip this assembly for cleaning. Only in the event of a broken part would it be necessary to break this down totally. We're going to cover that later, so I'll put that aside for now. Now the stock group consists of the buttstock, butt plate end screws, your rear sling swivel, and your front sling swivel. Not much to it. Again, the only time you would have to disassemble any of that is for breakage. Now for cleaning, there is a large multitude of items available for your use. You can use commercial bore cleaner. There are very many makes out on the market. But if you're going to shoot old World War II corrosive ammunition, you're going to find that the commercial bore cleaners made today simply aren't up to the job of the older ammunition. So see if you can come up with some old military bore cleaner. This happens to be World War II, but any military bore cleaner is adequate. As far as oil or lubricant, they had a great deal of difficulty initially with the bolt. Would tend to freeze up with heavy rain. They tried a great many lubricants and ended up with one called Lubriplate, which was issued in little itty-bitty containers of rifle grease that would fit in the buttstock. Any good lubricant, any good gun lube will work. In fact, even gun oil will work just for average shooter or planker. You really only would have to go to this if you get into maybe a long hunting trip. Also, you have to apply some on the face of the hammer up here. I don't use it very much myself. I personally find with this rifle that gun oil works adequately. Some of the other more modern lubricants on the market, I've heard they will work, I've heard they won't work. So for my money, if it doesn't say it in the Army manual, I don't use it. The important points on cleaning: your gas cylinder and the gas cylinder lock and lock screw are made out of stainless steel. So you shouldn't have much of a problem with corrosion or rusting there. An interesting note, you may find gas cylinders and lock screws and locks very shiny, almost a bare metal. You will see photographs from World War II of the weapons very, very shiny. They had a lot of problem coming up with a finish that would stick to the stainless steel. A field expedient was to paint them flat black, so you could run into one with paint on it. As far as cleaning goes, you can use an old GI issue pull-through thong. This has a jag on it for patches. It will unscrew and take a bore brush. The advantage of this is you can clean the barrel from the chamber end instead of the barrel end. Also, you can use your combination tool head and cleaning rods. The cleaning rod sections that fit in the buttstock, you simply screw them together till they're long enough. The disadvantage of this is possible barrel wear at the muzzle. So I just use the pull-through and clean it from the chamber end. As with any rifle, dip your brush in bore cleaner, run it through the barrel, keep dipping it in bore cleaner and running it through the barrel 4 or 5 times, depending on how much powder or metal fouling you may have in the barrel. Leave your barrel sit with that wet bore cleaner in it while you clean all the rest of your parts, and then go back and start running patches through your barrel until they come through clean. The reason you let it sit is to allow the bore cleaner time to penetrate into the bore and loosen up whatever fouling you may have in there. Another advantage to the World War II bore cleaner, it makes the powder fouling and carbon will almost wipe off of your gas piston, your gas cylinder lock screw, and the gas cylinder. The disadvantage is it stinks horribly, but I can air out the apartment. I'd rather have a clean weapon. Now, to reassemble the M1, to reassemble the barrel and receiver group. You start with your hand guard, and then your gas cylinder. And again, you may have to tap this on gently with a block of wood. Then your gas cylinder lock is threaded on the barrel. Running down all the way as far as it will go, and then back it off to line the hole up. Don't try forcing it on any farther than it wants to go. Then you run in your gas cylinder lock screw. If you should have to take this off with the weapon hot, do not run this screw in tight. What's going to happen, when the parts cool, they will shrink slightly, and you're going to have a heck of a time getting that out. So we take our combination tool and again our trusty wrench and run it in snug. To insert the bolt, you have to take the firing pin right here and go right through this opening right over here. The rear lock lug on the bolt here goes in front of this crosspiece. Hold your bolt at a slight angle. Turn it, and it should drop right in place. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do, and it may take some practice before it will drop right in like that for you. Another item that's very important to this job is a nice cold glass of soda. Not for the rifle, for me. Okay, now that we have the bolt in, it's time to put the operating rod in. Now, if you put all the parts to your receiver group in first, it causes interference sometimes putting the op rod in. So I put the operating rod in first. You start the gas piston in the gas cylinder, like so. Open your bolt and then pop your operating rod here up over the lock lug on the bolt, like that. Now if you pull your op rod back, when it hits this little cutout right here, it will drop into position, like that. And it's in. Now you turn it over and start with your shell follower. Drop it in the tracks in the receiver and drop it in. Okay. Now the plot thickens. What happens next, your bullet guide goes in the receiver, your operating rod catch goes in on top of this projection, but the arm on the bullet guide goes through this notch. Now, you may be saying I'm crazy, but it does work. Put your bullet guide in the top, but not all the way down into the rifle. You take your operating rod catch, fish it through the hole, and on a downward angle, so that this little L-shaped piece in your operating rod catch, it's called the accelerator, hooks on the top. Now if you'll notice, when it fits in there properly, you push down on the operating rod catch, your bullet latch moves. Okay? Now I find it useful to start your pin a little bit so everything doesn't fall out. You take your follower arm, the lugs on this end fit into the shell follower, and the pin, which goes through here, goes through the holes here. So you put it in the shell follower, drop it into position, and when everything is in just right, your pin will just fall right into place. To check for proper assembly, push your clip release, and your operating rod catch should move, and vice versa. Next comes this long operating rod spring. Goes in. It fits down inside the legs of the operating rod catch and hooks on the shell follower right down in here. That completes reassembly of the barrel and receiver group. To reassemble the weapon, you take your stock group, hook the front of the stock in the band, and drop the receiver into the rifle. Turn it over. Take your trigger housing, which must be unlocked. Push it in all the way, and then lock your trigger guard. That consists of field stripping the M1 rifle. Of course, always make sure before you handle any weapon that it's cleared. While disassembling the bolt is not part of your normal field stripping, we thought it might be a good idea to cover it. The key to this Chinese puzzle is the extractor. It holds in the firing pin and the ejector. To disassemble it, which you are supposed to be able to do inside the rifle, but I've never succeeded, you have to pry your extractor out this way. Now when this comes out three things are going to happen. Your firing pin will fall out, your extractor plunger will fall out, and if you're not very careful, your ejector and spring will go flying across the room. I won't tell you how far it went the first time I tried this. So you put your finger over the face of the bolt and pry your extractor straight up towards the top of the bolt, like this. Okay, out came the extractor. There is your ejector and spring, the firing pin, and the extractor plunger. After you have cleaned all your parts and coated them with a light coat of oil, you drop your firing pin in and then drop your ejector in. Now, the ejector has a cutout notch in it. This allows the, I don't know how well you can see this, pin on the extractor to hold it in place. So it will only go in one way. Drop it in. Then take your extractor, plunger, and spring and drop it in its hole. Now comes the fun part. Keeping the firing pin in is easy. Once you start the extractor in, it will hold the firing pin. Now what you have to do is push the ejector in, push the extractor in, and sometimes give it a little help by depressing the extractor plunger. So let's see if I can do this on the first try. Extractor is in. It's in all the way. It is spring loaded and everything is right where it's supposed to be. And now, my most unfavorite part of the weapon to disassemble, the trigger group. To start with, you have to have the hammer forward. Do not dry snap this. Let it forward slowly. If you dry snap it, you run a good chance of breaking the hammer off where it's thinnest, right here, or cracking your trigger housing. To start with, you have to remove this pin from the back. In order to do that, you have to push in on your sear. So you just push in on the sear and push your punch in, and out comes the pin. Now when you remove the punch, you have to push in on the sear again, and out comes your trigger, your hammer spring housing, your hammer spring, your hammer spring plunger. Now you have to remove this pin right here, again from the back. Then you wiggle it around just right, and your hammer falls out. Unlock your trigger housing, pull it down, and sometimes it's easier to remove the safety first. Just pry out the top of the safety slightly. Okay. This trigger housing here is a little on the tight side. There it went. Pry it off to the side. And down in here, you have your little spring that functions as your clip ejector and also puts pressure on your safety. I don't recommend removing it unless you have to, because it is a royal pain to put back in, so I'm not going to take it out. To reassemble, you take your trigger guard and you got to hook it around this pin. So just hook it on the trigger guard and slide it in position like that. Okay. Next is your safety. Drop it in the slot for it. And then to line it up on the hole, you have to depress the spring slightly, like that. It works. Okay. Now comes the hammer. Drop it in. And your hammer pin. And of course it's helpful if you have all the holes lined up first. Okay, now when you reassemble your hammer plunger spring and spring housing, if the spring housing is turned around this way to where you can see the spring, it is assembled incorrectly. In this situation, it will not apply pressure to your sear, and you can end up with a very unsafe condition known as a slam fire, where the hammer is not retained by the sear and is following the hammer forward, or following the bolt forward on the way down. This could cause the weapon to double or go full automatic. Please don't try this. And I have the fear that someone out there is going to say, gee, I can make my M1 go full automatic. The problem you're going to have, the bolt will not be locked when the cartridge is set off. And you're going to turn the M1 into a straight blowback weapon, which is going to result in serious injury to you and fatal injuries to the weapon. You have to have a timing system in the weapon to ensure that the bolt is fully locked before the cartridge is fired. That's, if you look at the Army manuals on the M14 or the M2 carbine, for example, you will see what they used to eliminate that, and also on the M16, the automatic sear, to eliminate that purpose. There is no safe way to convert this weapon to full automatic. Aside from being illegal to convert, I really wouldn't try it. So when you put this plunger back in, make darn sure you can't see the spring through it. goes in there this way, and the trigger drops in here. Now comes the fun part. You have to push the trigger forward, and when it does, it will line the holes up so you can start the pin. And I just put it against my leg and push, hang on to it, and start your pin. Now the pin probably will not go all the way in the first try, so it's just a matter of pushing down on the pin and wiggling the trigger. Until you get it in. It is not very comfortable job, so you probably won't want to take this apart every time you field strip your weapon. Now there's a couple of other accessories that we didn't mention earlier that are of the utmost importance. The Army Instruction Book for the Rifle, Field Manual 23-5. This one happens to be dated 1951, and this one is dated 1965. You can get these at gun shows quite cheaply. This was $3. And there is a wealth of information in here on the care and feeding of the M1. To go into more depth, Tech Manual 9-1275, Ordnance Maintenance on the M1. This Tech Manual, which has a long title, is also useful. You might run across some ordnance notes, base shop data on the M1. This is a reprint of the Army Manual. What they did in here is quite good. They reshot all of the photographs, so you can get a much clearer picture of what you have to do. This is a reprint from the American Rifleman magazine. Several useful things on the M1. And here are a couple of private books. Know Your M1 Garand and Hatcher's Book of the Garand. Any of these are very good. I highly recommend this one in particular if you can find it. It deals with the competition leading up to the M1 rifle all the way up through after the end of World War II, and then there when the book was originally published, and then there is a chapter that has been added dealing with the post-war. If you can add some of these to your library, you should not have any problems at all with the M1. Just about any problem you're going to have, the answer is in these books. An improvement over the basic M1 rifle was the M14. This incorporated a lot of design changes they came up with during World War II, but because of the war, they were unable to do it. The major changes, they developed a 20-round box magazine, selective fire capability, although this is a sniper rifle and lacks the selector. The ability to use chargers, stripper clips, to refill the magazine while still in the rifle. an improved gas tappet system, greatly smoothing out the action of the rifle, and a built-in flash hider. And on the other side of the weapon, of course, a bolt holdback lock, like almost any other magazine-fed rifle. But they put in provisions for mounting a scope on each and every rifle. All it takes is a single screw to lock the scope into place. You can make a few improvements on the M1, but not many.
So if you have either an M1, a sniper M1, or even an M14, you'd back away in the closet. It's about time you dug it out, took it out to the range, and let this old lady strut her stuff. She's got plenty of life left in her. The M1 has served this country very well throughout 2 wars, and it's still serving around the world today.
Welcome to Rock and Roll number 1, fully automatic machine gun fun. Welcome to Rock and Roll number 2. More guns, more fun. As in Rock and Roll number 1, we'll show you more than 20 automatic weapons from around the world, including the Thompson submachine gun, the MF-30 30mm lightweight automatic cannon, the 1917 water-cooled machine gun, the Browning automatic rifle, and many more.
My name is Ann, and I am a full-time actress and model. You may recognize me from a television show or commercials. This is a job where I didn't have to act. I'm actually enjoying it as much or more than it looks like on the screen. Firing that machine gun in that semi-auto mode doesn't even compare to when you hold that trigger back and let it rock and roll.
Lee didn't know what to expect at a firing range, having never been to one before. She discovered there were people of all ages and types interested in the sport of shooting. She had no idea that the subject of firearms covered such a vast array of equipment and accessories to accommodate the skills one learns.
Glenn Pierce competed on the All-Air Force high-power rifle team and as a civilian won the National 200-Yard Offhand Championship in 1978. In 1981, he won the Arizona State Championship by placing 33 shots out of 60 in the 3-inch X ring at 200 yards, offhand with iron sights. Jim Carter won both 5th Army and 8th Army high-power rifle championships. He was extensively trained as a gunsmith by the Army, and in 1972, Jim was selected as the only gunsmith for the U.S. Olympic rifle team.
That target on Wes's command will go up. You'll shoot 5 record shots 3 times for a total of 15 rounds.
The need for better tools and training in the area of officer survival must be met.
A small piece of metal, viewed on the top of the slide just in front of the rear sight, is pushed up when the trigger is pulled to the rear, freeing the front half of the firing pin.
Ruger Red Hawk, while the Ruger people will certainly not admit it for liability reasons, the Ruger Red Hawk will take just damn near any load you can put in it.
The sniper employment officer gives the team information concerning their area of operation.
CO of Alpha Company is First Lieutenant McGroy right here. You'll be stalking out from the people to set up unlikely avenues of enemy approach and infiltration.
Platoon leaders, squad leaders, and others who have been in the area previously also help.
The second team will be operating at night as an extension of night LP activities. You'll be operating in first squad of first platoon sector.
The sniper team is interested more in the significance of targets rather than quantity.
Time is now 0800. The daylight team will move out at approximately 1100. The night team will move out at 1900. Plan your time accordingly with your warning orders, your rehearsals, and your orders. Be prepared to move out at that time. That's all for now.
The rifle is still the main weapon of the modern battlefield, but any rifle is only as good as the marksman who uses it. So it's up to you, the shooter, to know the abilities and limitations of your particular rifle. This is Rifle Combat, and during the course of this video, we hope to give you the knowledge you will need to become technically and tactically proficient with your weapon. But first, we will look at what every shooter should know, and that's safety.
The Viet Cong rely heavily on mines and booby traps to knock out vehicles and kill their enemies. To be hit this way, all you have to do is be there and be careless.
The mission of the United States Marine Corps is to locate, close with, and destroy the enemies. Listen up. Destroy the enemies of the United States. In the early days and previous wars, Marines before us carried out this same mission, but with weapons that are now obsolete. Today, our infantry and that of our enemies carry a wide variety of fully automatic weapons. The 0331 machine gunners, while you are here, you will learn about the M60E3 machine gun, the M2 50 caliber heavy barrel machine gun, and the Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher. 0341 mortarmen, while you are here, you will learn about the 60 millimeter mortar and the 81 millimeter mortar. You will learn all about the 83 millimeter small and the M47 Dragon. While you are here, you will learn all about the TOW-2 missile system.
Join the action with 400 new recruits from Delta Company at the United States Marine Corps Firepower Demonstration.